Hi, welcome to my Long Island Retro Gaming Expo experience. I'm parrotnamedmike. Back in 2017, my wife got me tickets to Long Island Retro Gaming Expo. It's something I would never have purchased tickets for or gone to unless it was free and I was walking by in Manhattan or something like that. It's not something I would have sought out like New York Comic Con or something like that. Anyway, so we get there. We had the babysitter, no kids, just her and I. We were going to go for a little while and then have dinner, see a movie. Well, we walk in and I just couldn't believe what I had seen. I mean, I hadn't had any expectation, so of course I was impressed because it's hard to be disappointed when you have no expectation. With that being said, I had no idea that this would have zeroed in on the historical impact that the retro video games they were displaying had. I had no idea how personally curated each and every game, and even the CRT, the old tube TVs that were chosen, everything had been so carefully curated. There were classic posters everywhere. There were originals, there were reprints, everything looked vibrant and beautiful. In fact, it was almost as if I had walked into a time machine. I know that's maybe a little cliche at this point for people to say that. Everything is nostalgia nowadays. Everything is pop culture. Every movie we go to see is about a superhero or a comic book or a game that we experienced as a child or as a young teen or our college years. But this was a little bit different. This felt more authentic. And maybe that was because I felt a little embittered towards Comic-Con, because over the years with Comic-Con, what happened has been the AMC and the WB11 shows like Walking Dead and Arrow and DC Legends and all of that stuff has kind of overtaken Comic-Con. I remember when Comic-Con used to have the badges that were comic book art, you know, a Spider-Man badge or a Jim Lee Batman badge and things like that. Every year when the badges would come, it would be an exciting time with New York City Comic-Con. And then all of a sudden they were just screenshots of the AMC Walking Dead characters. Now, inherently that's not a bad thing, but it was an indicator of what Comic-Con would eventually turn out to be, which was 150 or 250,000 people squeezing by at the exact moment the convention, the Javits Center, is going to open, and there was just no way for you or for anyone to really fully experience what it was like to go to a comic book convention and to walk through Artist's Alley, because it just became this extraordinarily overstuffed, overhyped, empty, insincere husk of really the whole reason why communities and the networking groups get together to do these conventions. So maybe I sound overly embittered, but when I walked into the Long Island Retro Gaming Expo, I had zero expectation. I of course had been burnt out, as I said, and here it was, a time machine. Getting back to my silly cliche, this is what it felt like to be a kid in the early 90s, mid-90s, even in the late 80s, depending on the section you walked in. It's what it felt like to be a kid in 1981. And whatever you were into, if you were of age for that, there was a spot for you. And there were a group of people huddling around an original Atari system and talking about the glory days of Atari in the most real and sincere way. And there weren't so many people. This is 2017. There was almost, it was almost like no one knew it existed. They didn't even have real badges. They had like little printed tickets like you would get in the 50s if you were going to a movie theater or something. Just, there was somebody at the window saying, "All right, two, sure, go right in." And, you could go over to the arcade units, and they had all this information about who made the arcades, why they were significant. There were people there that were excited to show you that they had the original manuals in the arcade units. It was just a full, sincere picture of what it was like, what it felt like, and then to be in the time. And then, of course, everything is working and everything is free because the entrance fee is all you really need to pay in order to play all these things. And I mean, if you wanted to play an N64 game, they had rows of basically white folding tables that you would find at a backyard barbecue, just rows and rows of them with tube televisions on them connected to systems, or rows of these tables just with handheld systems, or a Vectrex for those of you who know what that is. And if you don't, you have to look it up. It's a vector graphics video game, and it's a really special thing. I didn't grow up with it, but looking back, it's one of those things that as an adult, I can say, man, if you would have given that to me as a kid, I would be waving the Vectrex flag all day and all night. But they had these things, and something that really struck me, was that all of this worked on the honor system, because there were some Game Boy Advance games, and the Game Boy Advances were there, and there were batteries in them, and the idea was, here's a stack of games, and here's a stack of systems, mix and match, play what you want, and then put it back down on the table, and there was no one there watching you to make sure you didn't put it in your pocket and walk away. And, I guess being a jaded New Yorker, my thought is, and this convention is in Long Island, New York, my thought is, like, looking around, like, is this one of those tests where they look to see what you do with it? And no, it was just the honor system, and you could sit there and play whatever you wanted for however long you wanted. And if you were playing something, and, back to the point I was originally trying to make, if you were playing something and you felt that person behind you, or you felt eyes on you behind you that maybe someone else wanted to play, it was like being back at that time where somebody would walk up to you, especially on the arcade. But I'm going to get to that in a second. But let's say we were talking about one of the consoles or the Game Boys, just to finish that piece. You felt somebody behind you or eyes on you. It was that feeling of, let me give it to you, maybe I'm taking up too much time. And every time that feeling happened to me, when I was on one of the original consoles, or I was on a gaming PC, or something like that, it was the person giving me a nod of approval saying, oh, no, I just remember playing it, and I just can't believe that you're there holding it. And there was this, it wasn't unspoken, it was spoken, but it was more of a body language and a human-to-human connection that you can't get playing online and things like that. And that's really what brought me back. And then, to round this piece out, I just want to say that first time was outside of when I was first dating Jane. And there were still a few arcades open. I mean, I guess maybe right now, just because of the popularity of everything and the nostalgia explosion, as I mentioned earlier, a few arcades are popping back up. But there was a good 10 years from, let's say 2004 to 2014, or even 2016, where this stuff was so dead that unless you built a cabinet or bought a Pac-Man cabinet on eBay and put it in your basement like I did, there was no way to get to these things. So when I walk up to, let's say, I walked up to the first arcade cabinet I ever walked up to in my life is the first arcade cabinet I walked up to when I went there, which was Street Fighter 2. And of course, just like in 1992 or 1994 or 1996, there was somebody already on the machine, and that person was already beating the crap out of the computer AI fighters. So you knew that person was good, and back in the day, you would think to yourself, this guy or this girl, this person would just be here all day, and I have no shot, but what the hell, I have a quarter, I'm here to play, let's do it. So the good news is you don't need a quarter, but I remember, like, all of a sudden, that anxiety just came bubbling back up, like, uh-oh, I have my wife here, there's real stakes. Like, when I was a kid, the stakes were, I lose my quarter, I don't get to play anymore, so there's the element of, can I afford to lose quickly? So if this person gets a perfect victory on me and I don't get a hit in, I've wasted my one chance to play this arcade game. And I was back there. I was 7, 8, 9, 10 years old again. And I walk up to this person playing a Street Fighter 2 machine. Only now I'm not worried about the quarter, because I have enough quarters to play for hours. And that's not bragging, but I mean, you know, if you have $3 or $4 at 35 years old, which you could play for an hour, right? I mean, if you're really good enough. But the thing that I was worried about was being humiliated in front of my wife. I didn't want to step on this game, and have her see that, you know, since she met me, one of the first things we spoke about, besides Terminator and the movies and things like that, were video games. And her first game she would talk about would be Super Mario World or Aladdin on Super Nintendo. And the first thing I would ever talk about whenever we talked about video games was Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat. But it always was Street Fighter first. So now here I am. And shocking, we've been together 16 years. There was never a time where outside of when we first dated, like I said earlier, where I walked up to a cabinet, and this is the first time it was actually Street Fighter 2. A previous time I could talk about, which I'm not going to get into, is Marvel vs. Capcom. I'll briefly just say I destroyed a bunch of kids at Peter Pan Arcade in Queens. And those kids just could not believe I walked in and demolished them in Marvel vs. Capcom. They screwed with the wrong guy, they were making fun of me, and I put them all down. It was a great moment for me. And if Jane was here, she would tell you I'm only exaggerating a little bit, but I really did destroy them all. So this was the first time she'd ever seen me play Street Fighter 2 against another human being. And as strange as that sounds, I felt like a lot of pressure. So there I am, time warped back to 7 years old with the quarter my grandmother gave me as payment for going to get her a coffee. So I go up, I press start. Person next to me is almost at Bison, which is the final guy, and I say to him, is it alright if I join in? Because I almost wanted him to say, no, I'm really trying to beat this, or I'm going for a record. I mean, people don't go for records on how fast you could beat Street Fighter 2. It's not a game you speed run, like, let's say, how fast can you beat Mario 64? And of course the person, like I said, because the entire experience was like this, said, no, man. Come on, let's do it. And the nicer the person is to you, the more you know that they don't have an ego, because they don't need an ego, because they're going to mollywop you. And my heart was just pounding. And so I said, okay. So, you know, what you do anytime you walk up to an arcade, for the youngins of Nurgent Care who don't know, the first thing you do when you walk up to an arcade is complain that the controls are just a little off, because you're going to need that excuse later for how bad you lose, and you still want to look cool in front of your girl or your spouse or whoever. So, you know, the first thing I did was I felt around, and I looked back convincingly to Jane and was just like, joypad's a little sticky, but it'll be fine. Anyway, so we hit start. I pick Ryu, and just for a little extra nostalgia, we all used to call him Ryu, I know, but it's Ryu. So we start playing, and this guy's Sagat, and Sagat punches from one side of the screen, and he's not the stretch guy, he's not Dhalsim, but for some reason his fist just goes halfway through the screen, and boom, I get destroyed in 10 seconds. And I know that this guy was going easy on me just to feel me out, and he still destroyed me in 10 seconds. And I said to myself, this is it. I cannot keep doing this. I won't be able to walk away with my pride. So I shook his hand. I said, good game, and I moved on. And I'm not proud of that moment, but that's what had to happen. It's that kind of thing. That singular experience in the arcade with Street Fighter 2, with a humble counterparty, shoulder to shoulder. You don't know this person. You may never see this person again, or this person may become your friend for life. I mean, that's just how it was, because you weren't online. You were right there, and you were standing toe to toe with this guy saying, here I am. And even if you lose, it's not important. Victory means nothing. The fight is everything. We went on downstairs to the vendors after the overwhelming display. The games are upstairs. If you look downstairs, you saw this unbelievable set of vendors. You know, I went through everything. I went to every vendor, and there's so many wonderful things. It's the old story of how much can I carry? How much is in my account? Let's try to make this work and buy every single thing you see. But that's really not what this is about, is it? I mean, it really wasn't representative of the feeling to just engorge yourself in every single thing that you think you need or want, or, it wasn't about filling a hole or a void to make yourself feel better. It was more about experiencing the wonder of the hobby of playing video games. The retro part of all of this was simply a callback to how it began. And it's important to understand how it began to fully appreciate where it is today and where it can go. So when we were at the vendors, there really was only one thing that I ended up getting, and that is a Super Mario figure, a she-fig, of him spitting a fireball wearing the fire suit, because it was so perfectly representative of what was so amazing about this expo. And I have it. I'm looking at it now as I record. It was the start of a little Super Mario diorama Jane and I have been working on literally since that day. We've taken that day and we've built on it. One final thought about 2017, and it's the same thing for 2019. I did skip 2018 because my boys were sick. I don't remember exactly with what, it's not important, but I remember thinking, oh my God, we are all so sick. And the last thing on my mind is, let's get a babysitter and go to a retro gaming expo, even though I still jokingly tell my wife, besides some of the obvious things, it is one of the greatest days of my life. It was one of the greatest days of my life. Anyway, so with 2017 and of course 2019, the tradition continued. There were a lot of children there. The children themselves, you may say, well, their parents brought them, and it's good that they have the exposure, but who knows if that's going to stick. There were teens there who have sort of adopted this retro gaming culture, for whatever their own personal reasons. I mean, once you walk in, that same wash, like that ocean wave, it hit me, and I felt it in my chest of, oh my God, this place is so awesome. Even though it's a little more commercialized this time around, it still has that feeling of walking back into the reality of what it was like, the sincere feeling of walking into a Funko Land circa 1995, or an EB Games, or a Gary's video store, and walking by the VHS with your parents and begging them to rent you a Super Nintendo game or a Sega Genesis game. It still had that impact on me. But one of the things that I did a little differently this time was making a much more concerted effort to speak to people. Teenage kid, and I was speaking with him, and I said, "What are you doing here? You can't be more than 17 years old." And he wasn't. He was even younger than that. And he said, "Oh, I just absolutely love this stuff." When he said it, I believed him. It's not like when you're, back to being jaded. It's not like when you're at Comic-Con and there's a bunch of people there dropping big bucks for art prints or signatures or waiting online to meet the Green Ranger. Again, I love you, Green Ranger. I love you, but I mean, come on, enough is enough. When he said that, it was so real for me. He really wanted to be a part of it. And when you bring that sincerity to something, you are now a part of it. You leave an indelible mark on whatever you are putting your love into becomes infused with that. So here in this Expo of 2019, and there's a 16-year-old kid telling me how much he loves playing classic games that he bought on eBay or bought at garage sales and stuff like that, because he loves just that original feeling, and he loves understanding where all of this stuff came from. I asked him, what do you want to do with your life? I mean, you're a smart kid. I already love you. So tell me, what are you doing with your life? And he said, I want to be a game designer. I can't tell you how forward I look to what this person will create because of the foundation out of their sincere love of the medium. I think that that's where the Expo, where Long Island Retro Gaming Expo really hits. And has done for me. It has done for my wife, and I know, and everyone around us felt it, that it left this feeling, this indelible feeling on us that for those of us who were there, we really were part of something special. and it deserves to be remembered and deserves to be celebrated. And for those of us who weren't there, there's still so much to offer, and it's a great foundational point for how to enjoy the medium and other mediums going forward. I hope that this tradition continues. I look forward to going next year. I look forward to seeing everyone. And I hope that maybe places, events like Comic-Con can maybe take a little page out of Long Island Gaming Expo's book and remember that there's a reason why we're all here, and it's not just to plop down a few bucks and to advertise for your new show or movie coming up. I mean, that's cool, but that's not really why we're here. We're here because we want to know why we fell in love in the first place. I mean, we know why, but we want to know if the people putting on the convention or the event, do they know why we fell in love with this in the first place? I also met up with a company, a nonprofit called the Saber Guild. These people put on a choreographed action sequence for the kids at Stony Brook Children's Hospital. I've never heard of anything like this being done outside of truly expensive professional theatrical crews. It's a very moving thing. The feeling I had was, obviously everybody does what they do for a reason. The question that I didn't want to ask is what inspired. The obvious question is, of course, everybody wants to do these things, but how come my first instinct when I wake up isn't to give my entire body and finances and everything to charity? If I have responsibilities, but these people had responsibilities. There were children there were young people there were older people there, closer to my age and older, who have responsibilities and families. But the question I was too scared to ask was, what happened in their life that made them want to do this? And I hope to have a discussion with them later and ask that. But the Gaming Expo wasn't the right venue. But you're so taken aback when you see the love and the care and the dedication that they put into all of this that you're immediately now taken. It's just over and over and over when you go to an event like this that is so powerful. And so there are times where you're laughing and there are times where you're screaming in frustration at a TV screen. And then there's, shockingly, when I spoke to the Saber Guild, this time I was moved. And how could this be happening? How could I be moved this much and so inspired and so in awe? And a little bit of hint of guilt that I don't do this on my own. They dedicate their lives to giving to children who just don't have, who are infirm, who are in bad health. It's a wonderful organization. I implore everybody listening to go check out the Saber Guild. They're on Instagram, YouTube. Just give it a quick Google. It'll be worth your time. Reach out to me about your convention experiences. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And don't forget to head on over to my YouTube channel to watch my product review of the Game Stand. It's an original creation from a local vendor at the Expo. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on more product reviews, top 10s, and other great Parrot Name Mike content. There's something for everyone. Thanks again for listening.